Welcome to the third webinar for the Education Research and Development Centers Competition, CFDA number 84.305C. This year, the National Center for Education Research is competing 3 Research and Development Centers, or R&D centers. This webinar is tailored for the third center topic being competed for fiscal year 2020, Improving Access, Instruction, and Outcomes in Gifted Education. Separate webinars are also available for the other 2 R&D center topics. Those webinars go over the same general information but include specific information about the relevant centers. My name is Corrine Alfeld, and I am the Program Officer for the Gifted R&D Center topic in the National Center for Education Research. Let's get started. In this webinar, I will first provide an overview of IES. Next, I will talk about both general requirements for R&D centers and specific requirements for the Gifted Education Center. Finally, I will provide information on next steps for R&D center applicants. Before launching into the fiscal year 2020 R&D Center competition, I will briefly describe the core purpose of the Department of Education and IES. As you probably know, the U.S. Department of Education aims to promote student achievement and preparation. The Institute of Education Sciences is the research arm of the department, as authorized by the Education Sciences Reform Act in 2002. IES is nonpartisan. It is charged with providing rigorous evidence to inform education policy and practice and sharing this information with educators, parents, policymakers, researchers, and the public. The overall mission of IES is to describe the condition and progress of education in the United States, identify education practices that improve academic achievement and access to education opportunities, and evaluate the effectiveness of federal and other education programs. This graphic represents the organizational structure of IES. We are led by a director who receives advice and consultation from the National Board for Education Sciences. The board consists of 15 voting members who are appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. Our science office oversees the scientific peer review processes for IES grant applications and IES reports. We also have 4 centers within IES. The National Center for Education Statistics is the primary federal entity for collecting and analyzing data related to education. Within NCES, you may be familiar with the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or the NAEP assessment. Within NCES, you will also find many national large longitudinal data sets, including, for example, the Early Childhood Longitudinal Study. The National Center for Education Evaluation and Regional Assistance, or NCEE, conducts unbiased, large-scale evaluations of education programs supported by federal funds, provides technical assistance, and supports the development and use of research and evaluation throughout the United States. In NCEE, you will find the What Works Clearinghouse, WWC, and the Regional Education Labs, or RELs. The 2 centers that award grants are highlighted here in blue. The National Center for Education Research, referred to as NCER, and the National Center for Special Education, or NCSCR, NICSR. The grant opportunities that we will be talking about today are managed through NCER. You will also notice here that the research centers are separate from the science office and standards and review staff, meaning that we, the program officers, are not involved in the peer review process. This allows us to work closely with you, providing technical assistance to you on your applications. I will discuss more about that later in this webinar. NCER supports field-initiated innovative solutions to improve education research and inform policy and practice. This includes rigorous relevant research, the dissemination of findings from education research to various stakeholders, and the development and training of researchers prepared to conduct high-quality research and disseminate their findings. We have separate requests for applications, or RFAs, for the research and training activities. The competition we are discussing today, CFDA 84.305C, covers education research and development, or R&D centers. The R&D centers contribute to solving U.S. education problems and generating new knowledge and theories relevant to the focus of the center. The centers also provide national leadership within the center's topic by disseminating research and engaging in dialogue with researchers, practitioners, and policymakers. And finally, the centers are responsible for conducting research on supplemental questions that emerge within the center's topic area. This supplemental work will vary depending on the needs of the field and IES input. IES R&D centers are cooperative agreements in which the institution that holds the grant and IES work together to ensure a successful project. This means that during the life of the center, IES will help provide input and guidance on the center's activities. For the fiscal year 2020 Education Research and Development Center competition, you must submit your application to one of the 3 R&D Center topics listed below. Topic 1 is Improving Opportunities and Achievement for English Learners in Secondary School Settings, called the Secondary Schools EL Center for short. Topic 2 is Improving Teaching and Learning in Post-Secondary Institutions, called the Post-Secondary Center for short. Topic 3 is Improving Access, Instruction, and Outcomes in Gifted Education, called the Gifted Center for short. That's the one we've been talking about on this webinar. You should indicate which center you are applying to on your application. See the submission guide for more information about this. In this webinar, I am only providing information about the National Research and Development Center on Improving Access, Instruction, and Outcomes in Gifted Education, or the Gifted Center. The Gifted Center will examine how state, district, and school leaders and educators can implement policies and practices to better identify and serve gifted learners from all demographic backgrounds and improve student outcomes through gifted education. Other centers have separate webinars that cover much of the same information as this one, with the exception of some center-specific requirements. The Gifted R&D Center is being competed by IES in fulfillment of the requirement in the Jacob J. Javits Gifted and Talented Students Education Program in the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, for a National Research Center for the Education of Gifted and Talented Children and Youth. When preparing your application for any of the centers, make sure you attend to both the requirements and the recommendations in the RFA. You must meet the minimum requirements in order for your application to be sent forward for peer review. Make sure you read these carefully. In addition to the requirements, the RFA provides additional recommendations in each center topic area to help you write a competitive application. These are what the reviewers will focus on when scoring applications. The recommendations include suggestions and guidance that applicants should keep in mind when preparing their application narratives and relevant appendices. Where appropriate, the recommendations are aligned with the new IES Standards for Excellence in Education Research, or SEER principles, to ensure that the research is transparent, actionable, and focused on meaningful outcomes that have the potential to dramatically improve education. In order for your R&D Center application to be reviewed, you must meet the requirements in the RFA for education outcomes, education settings, the focused program of research, other center activities, and award limits. We will talk about each one of these in this webinar. Note that the RFA contains different requirements and recommendations for each R&D center. Because each center is different, it is important that you attend to your topic's requirements and recommendations closely and not assume that they are the same as the other centers in this year's competition or to other centers in other years. Each R&D Center has a different focused program of research. In the focused program of research for the Gifted Center, IES expects applicants to propose several research projects that, together, have the potential to improve access, instruction, and student outcomes for learners from disadvantaged backgrounds. The prior Gifted Center discovered that very few districts offer programs to identify and recruit potentially gifted students, and that English learners, free or reduced lunch recipients, and Hispanic and Black students are less likely to be identified as gifted even if they have the same reading and mathematics achievement as students not from these groups. The new Gifted Center will be expected to build on the findings from the prior Gifted Center. The RFA includes several project ideas, but IES also welcomes and encourages other project ideas developed by the field. All research supported under the R&D Centers program must measure academic outcomes. These vary by topic, age, and setting, reflect learning and achievement and/or successful progression through the education system, and may include social behavioral competencies or employment or earnings outcomes as relevant. For the Gifted R&D Center, you may also include other outcomes, which I'll talk about momentarily. All proposed research must also be relevant to education in the United States and must address factors under the control of the U.S. education system. Education in the U.S. is delivered in a wide range of formal settings. In addition, there are also formal programs under the control of education agencies that take place out of school, including after-school distance learning and online programs. IES does not support research that occurs in informal contexts outside of education systems and outside the control of education agencies. Contact an IES program officer if you have questions about the education setting or settings that you have identified for your proposed research. Please note that the setting requirements vary by center topic. For the Gifted Center, your sample must focus on students in the K-12 age range. You can include some or all of those grades. For your outcomes, your research must include academic outcome measures, as I mentioned previously. You may also include measures of social and behavioral competencies and post-high school outcomes if these are relevant. You may also include milestones and achievement metrics that are specific to gifted learners, such as grade acceleration in special honors or alternate measures of giftedness. For your research settings, your research must be conducted in K-12 schools or use data collected from K-12 schools. You must plan to conduct research in at least 2 states or territories. Please read the Gifted Center topic in the RFA carefully so that you can include information specific to the Gifted Center in your application. I'm highlighting some of the important unique parts, but please read all of the requirements and recommendations for each section for the project narrative under the Gifted Center topic. Each center will also be responsible for 2 types of other activities: national leadership and dissemination activities and supplemental studies. First, we will discuss national leadership and dissemination. There are a few general elements that all centers should include in this section of the narrative. All centers are responsible for engaging with researchers, practitioners, and policymakers. You'll need to have a website to post information about the center, resources, and reports. You'll need to think about how to use technology in innovative ways to disseminate your findings to various audiences. You'll also need to make your final research data available for others to use, and you'll need to submit final manuscripts for papers to the Education Research Information Clearinghouse, or ERIC. In your application, you should describe the audiences your center will intend to reach and the activities you will use to engage those audiences. Finally, you should show your capacity for leadership and outreach. Note that expectations and recommendations for leadership and dissemination vary by topic. I mentioned earlier that each center has its own unique requirements and recommendations. As an example, for a competitive gifted center application, in the Leadership and Outreach section, you should describe how the center's work will build the capacity of local and state education agencies to address the problem of underrepresentation to ensure all gifted students access to effective gifted education, and describe how you will involve other Javits-funded researchers, for example, by coordinating and communicating, hosting meetings, and conducting joint conference presentations to share research and findings. Once again, please refer to the RFA for a full list of recommendations for an application to the Gifted R&D Center topic. Each center is also responsible for supplemental activities. These can be meetings or smaller scale studies. The center will work cooperatively with IES to select and design these supplemental activities. Therefore, in your application, there is no need to provide a detailed plan for the supplemental activities. You should instead show your capacity for conducting supplemental activities and set aside at least 5% of your total budget for these activities. The final requirement that you must attend to is the overall limits for the center. Each R&D center can last for up to 5 years. Please note that the maximum grant amount for the Gifted Center is $5 million. At least 5% of each center's budget, which is $250,000 for the Gifted Center, should be reserved for supplemental activities to be designed in collaboration with IES. Now let's review the general elements of preparing the narrative for your proposal. The proposal narrative is the heart of your application, where you set out your plan of research and the justification for it. The peer reviewers focus on the center narrative, which is composed of 5 sections, and we recommend that it be no longer than 35 pages. The 5 sections are significance, research plan, national leadership and outreach activities, management and institutional resources, and personnel. In the RFA, you will find a list of requirements and recommendations for each of these sections. Note that both the requirements and recommendations vary by topic, so you will want to read them closely. There are also a series of appendices you will need to submit with your proposal. Some are required, but others are optional. For information about these, you should refer to the RFA and discuss any questions or concerns with the program officer for your topic. The first 2 sections of your center narrative focus on the significance of your center and the focused program of research that I mentioned earlier. In the significance section, you will discuss the topic and primary purpose of your center, why your center would be important, and what important questions and/or needs your center would address. This is where you're building your case for why your work would be valuable. The research plan should link to the significance section and clearly align with it. In this section, you're providing details about the way you would answer the questions or needs you raised in the significance section. You will provide specific details about how you would conduct this work, including things such as the setting, sample, methods, measures, analysis plan, and other elements that you will use. In your proposal narrative, when you discuss leadership and outreach activities, you should make sure to discuss the audiences you intend to reach and how you will communicate with them. IES expects that each center will have a website where they share information with multiple audiences. Make sure you identify the researchers and practitioners you intend to work with while engaging in your leadership and outreach activities. Be sure to align these activities not only to the topic you have chosen, but also the requirements and recommendations within that topic, as stated in the RFA. In the fourth section, the Management and Institutional Resources section, you should describe the organizational structure and management of the center and its activities and demonstrate that you have the capacity to conduct the supplemental activities and leadership and outreach. You will want to make it clear that you have people and resources available to do the work you have discussed in the previous sections. If you plan to work in schools or other education delivery settings in the first year, you must include letters of agreement from those educational organizations. If the developer or distributor of a program or intervention is working as part of or with the center, describe their role and how you will maintain objectivity. The final section is the personnel section. Here you should describe the key personnel at your institution and, if applicable, at other subaward institutions. You should describe each person's training, experience, and role and their time on the project so that it is clear that they will be committing sufficient time to the project. This is where you demonstrate your overall team's expertise in the relevant content area or areas and your team's methodological and dissemination expertise. One or more research teams may be involved in the different proposed studies. The proposed studies can be of any of the IES project types. Across the studies, IES expects the successful applicant to conduct their research in multiple settings that systematically vary across different populations and learning contexts. Such variation should improve our ability to identify what interventions work for whom and under what conditions. Now that you know what needs to be in your application, what should you do next? As mentioned frequently in this webinar, you should carefully read the full RFA. I have only included highlights here. This year, we have a separate application submission guide. Since it is now a separate document from the RFA, you will need to access and download it separately. Read it carefully, as there are many instructions that will help you submit your application correctly and on time. You may need to set up accounts ahead of the deadline, so don't wait until the last minute. This slide includes important dates for the 84.305C R&D Center competition. Applications must be received at grants.gov no later than September 26, 2019 at 11:59 and 59 seconds p.m. Eastern Time. Letters of intent are due on July 11, 2019, and the application package will be posted on grants.gov on July 11th as well. The possible start dates for the award are between July 1 of 2020 and September 1 of 2020. A letter of intent, or LOI, is expected, but not required or binding. You can submit online at this web address. Your LOI should include the following: a descriptive title, the R&D Center topic that you will address, a brief description of the proposed R&D Center, the name, institutional affiliation, address, telephone number, and email address of the principal investigator and any co-principal investigators, name and institutional affiliation of any key collaborators and contractors, the duration of the proposed R&D Center, and the estimated total budget request. Please attend to the budget maximums for your R&D Center topic. There are a few things I want to leave you with before we finish this webinar. First, read the request for applications. There is a lot of detail and important detail in the RFA. IES has spent a great deal of time over the years making the RFA a user-friendly guide to developing a high-quality application, so be sure you know those requirements and recommendations for the center topic to which you are submitting. Browse through the posted abstracts of our funded center grants on our website. Our abstracts are fairly detailed, so they will give you a good sense of the quality and type of grant that may typically get funded by IES. IES will also post on-demand webinars that you can access at your convenience, covering a wide range of topics, including grant writing workshop or webinars about specific funding competitions, as this one is. Those will be posted in the coming weeks. We also have a Resources for Researchers page with grant information for you, including methodological resources to assist in preparing an IES research grant application, videos from past IES training institutes, information about available data sets and tools, among other things. The best way to develop a competitive application is to discuss your idea with and receive feedback from a program officer. You may discuss your center idea with a program officer by emailing a short description of your ideas and scheduling a time for a call, or emailing short questions. With time permitting, I will review draft applications. Note that the earlier you send a draft, the more likely you are to receive comprehensive feedback. I am the program officer for the Gifted Education R&D Center, and here is my email address. I'd be happy to schedule a time for a call if you email me.